Hey, what's going on, guys? In this video, I'm going to be doing my review of the Li-Ning Red Hare 9 Pro. But before we go into the video, I'm going to go over my stats just so you can understand some of what's going to be informing my bias and perspective. So I am 5'11", I weigh about 190 pounds. My daily miles pace is anywhere between an 8:15 to an 8:45, and I'll even flash up my run from earlier today when I did my review to get this to 30 miles. My tempo and threshold pace is generally anywhere between a 6:30 to 7 minutes. And then along with that, I run about 40 to 50 miles per week. I have a mixed foot strike. So with my right foot, I am a heavy heel striker. And then with my left foot, I strike more midfoot. And some of my bias or preferences when I'm looking at shoes are something that generally has some stability components to it. I don't necessarily need a full-on stable shoe, but something that has, for example, like a wider platform or something that's going to at least push me more towards the lateral side, because my ankles do collapse in a little aggressively, and that can cause some post-tib pain. Those are going to be some of the things that I particularly look for and what some of my biases. So with that out of the way, the question of the day is, are we all really going to ever find a replacement for the Endorphin Speed 1? So the reason I bring that up is because when I was looking at this shoe initially, a lot of the comparisons a lot of people were making online were like, oh, it's basically an Endorphin Speed OG. Oh, like if you want the Endorphin Speed, just pick up a pair of the Li-Ning Red Hare 9 Pros. And kind of, answering a little bit of a preview of the review up front here is that this doesn't really hit the mark. But that has nothing to do with how I feel about this shoe overall. But when I was really thinking about it, I think we're all really chasing a ghost when it comes to trying to find that Endorphin Speed OG replacement. And the reason for that is because, so when that shoe came out around that time period, a lot of us were running in very boring daily trainers. So whether it was something like the Kinvara, I think it was the 14, or the 13, I forget, it was around there. That's what I was typically running in, or I thought a cool shoe at that time was the original Hoka Rincon, just to give some references to what we were looking at as daily trainers at the time. And so of course, when you compare those shoes with their more traditional EVA midsoles, or at least the Rincon, it had a bit of a forefoot rocker. I mean, getting something with that P-Bax foam, and then it had that nylon plate with the aggressive forefoot rocker. I mean, that was just an insane experience in and of itself because it was so new and different. And I think that's something that at this point, I really think, and I've said this before, like I think we're kind of in like the late stages of the running shoe game at the moment, where at this point, I think a lot of us are, as I refer to it, as majoring in minors, like focusing on these minute details like, oh, is it ATPU? Oh, it's an outdated foam because they're using PIBA. There's newer and better foams. It's like, I don't actually necessarily believe that to be the case. I think a lot of people are over-indexing on whatever the latest foam technology is. And at the end of the day, we're really arguing about very minute percentage increases in energy return and comfort, for example. So, yeah, that's the question of the day. Will we ever actually find an Endorphin Speed OG replacement? And are we, in effect, just chasing a ghost, trying to find that next shoe? But with that being said, I'm gonna pass it off to the upper portion of the review that I filmed earlier today in my garage. Alrighty, y'all, so I am in the garage today. Wife's up on the couch in the living room, so got to do this in the garage so she can have the morning to herself with her two doggos. And definitely didn't want the doggos knocking over the camera or anything. So today, just looking at the upper for this portion of the review. Putting on the Li-Ning, yeah, so the Li-Ning Red Hare 9 Pro, and I remember this when I first got the shoe. It definitely fits a little bit narrower. So if you watch the Fadian 5 Challenger review, I think like for example, you could see like there's a lot of room at the top of the foot here, and it definitely does not have that same generosity when it comes to that foot volume. So Definitely would not recommend if you have a wider foot or need more foot volume. That's going to be, in my opinion, the biggest limiting factor here. Other than that, though, it's a nice lighter daily trainer upper. Like, it definitely doesn't have like a race day upper fit or feel to it, although it definitely is on the lighter side. And the one interesting thing to note too is that this streak here is actually, it feels like it's laminated, and it does provide a little extra sidewall support, so I do appreciate that. So lockdown in general is good, especially because it's got that snugger fit up front. The one thing I do wish this had, which I'm shocked it doesn't, is that it doesn't have a gusset at all. And I think that would really help with the midfoot, because the midfoot area, I would say, is probably the one area where it's a little less of a lockdown feeling, because again, they're trying to rely on the snugness, I think, to provide that lockdown, and I think having the gusset actually can go a long way. And then other than that, I'm not sure if you can see it, so I'll just flash it up here, but I did put these sawtooth laces on the shoes as well, just because the laces that were on them wasn't a big fan of, so that was a slight modification there. As for the rest of the upper though, right? So it's lightweight. It does have a your typical daily trainer heel counter. It's not overly stiff. I think it's just the right amount. So yeah, I think this upper is solid though. Again, for a daily trainer, it doesn't need to be anything fancy. Can it show up? Can it do its job? So other than the foot volume issue, I actually do enjoy this upper quite a bit, even though it doesn't have that midfoot lockdown with the tongue gusset. So personally for me, honestly, I would probably rate this upper an 8 out of 10. It's definitely not going to be accommodating for everyone, but with especially those with the width or the toe box volume needs. But I think for everyone else, they'll be pleasantly surprised by this, especially with how light and thin this upper is, especially for the summer months that have been going on here in Texas. Definitely been enjoying that. So that being said, also I think it looks pretty nice as well. Yeah, nothing crazy going on. It's not anything funky. It's not doing anything too crazy in either direction. But again, like, things for me when I'm thinking of a daily trainer upper that's going to make sure that it gets a good rating is, does it still have some support? Do I still feel like I'm getting a good lockdown? Is it comfortable enough? And I think it does all of that really well. It's kind of, though, to make a comparison to like American daily trainers, which I think is always like a fun comparison, is that this shoe is not as beefy as what a typical Nike or a Brooks or a Hoka daily trainer is like, right? Like, those shoes, they have a lot more plushness to them, which I think adds to their weight. But I do think, and I find a lot of value personally, especially in the summer or warmer months, that having these lighter uppers is actually a better choice in my opinion, because I mean, the tongue here, for example, you can see it's still plush, so I think you're still getting some comfort there, but not to the point where it's going to make your foot run hot. So 8 out of 10 as far as the upper goes. It's solid, it's well built. The laces, I mean, that was just more of like a me thing at the time. I'm sure the regular laces were fine. If I'm not mistaken, they're the same as the ones that are in the Fadian 5 Challenger, so that's just a personal preference for me. But yeah, I think most people will get along well with this upper, unless you have that wider foot. That's gonna be the real deal breaker here. So with that being said, I'm gonna get out on the run, and then I'll go back into the studio in my house for the rest of the review. All right, and so now that we're back here in the studio to go over the rest of the review, let's talk about the midsole now. So when we're looking at the midsole here, it's going to be a peated Piba foam from what I could find on it, and then it also has a plastic shank in the middle. Important here is that it is a shank. It is not going all the way to the forefoot, so again, it's qualities like that that I think inherently don't make it the same experience as the Endorphin Speed, even if this shoe were to have come out at the same time as the Endorphin Speed. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because as I said during my X-Step review of that 2000 kilometer 5 Pro, I've really been enjoying reconnecting with some lower stack shoes as of late. Again, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier about over-indexing on what the spec sheet or the stats say. I think a lot of people, and myself included, kind of fell down the rabbit hole as far as, oh, it's gotta be 42 millimeters or higher in the heel. I want max cushion. Like, it needs to be max cushion or nothing. And I think it's honestly been a bit to my detriment. I've definitely noticed some fatiguing and weakness in my ankles as of late. And I think it's just due to relying on the shoes to do some of that work versus using some of our own intrinsic muscles to actually do the running for us. So it's been really nice getting into this more traditional lower stack foam. I'll flash up the stats here for the midsole itself, but from what I recall, I believe it was 36 millimeters in the heel and then 28 in the forefoot for a 8 millimeter drop. And I will say this right off the bat, I enjoyed this midsole foam a lot. It's nothing that's going to be heavily opinionated. It's not going to be pushing you forward. If you want to step back and cruise for your easy paces, like what I did today, it does it well. If you need to pick up the pace, I've done hill repeat workouts in this shoe and it performed phenomenally well. It is a pretty light shoe overall, and I think it helps because it doesn't, as I had mentioned during the upper review, it's got a much thinner upper. It's not necessarily full on race day, but it's definitely lighter than a lot of the American traditional trainers. It's not focusing on having that overly plush instep feel that I think the more typical American running brands are looking for when people are trying shoes on in the store. This is definitely still going to be more performance oriented. And with that being said, the one thing that I actually thought of, kind of going back to my question at the beginning, is that I think that this shoe actually could have been and should have been the better daily trainer option to the Endorphin Speed when that shoe came out, because as I'm sure many of you recall, it was the Endorphin Pro, the Endorphin Speed, and the Endorphin Shift. And a lot of people were looking at the Endorphin Shift and like scratching their head, like, where does this actually make sense or fit in within the lineup? The Endorphin Shift was heavier. I believe it was full EVA, and it just wasn't received very well. I know Matt from DOR really enjoyed the Shift. I'm sure it had its own nice qualities to it, but again, giving it the Endorphin, like the name or that series from Saucony, it just didn't really live up to what that series was intended for as far as being like the more speedier option. Like, this is for sure a daily trainer. But again, not something that's gonna force you into a tempo or threshold. Again, the plastic plate here is just for stability, which I personally enjoyed a lot. And it just performs really well. And so I think a lot of people can get along really well with this midsole. One caveat I will say though, this is a very normal thing that happens, at least what I'm used to from my tennis background, is that you definitely get a bit of an arch bump when you first wear the shoe. So, and that'll break in over time. So I think it took about, I wanna say 2 runs, so about 10 miles for that midfoot arch bump to really break in. But I don't have a problem with that. Again, I think a lot of people are looking for instant gratification when they're trying on shoes nowadays, but sometimes you just gotta work with the shoe a little bit and it's gonna give you a lot more in the long run. Kind of like how I felt about the Cloud Monster Hyper 3. One of my favorite shoes of the year was not the best shoe for the first 10 to 15 miles. And I think the same thing here is that it's actually gotten better over time. So as far as the midsole goes, I will say this, I think that, and I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. I don't think it's gonna be the best shoe for everyone, and it's simply because I don't believe that the impact protection is going to necessarily be the best. It's very responsive, but when it comes to actually absorbing the impact, I just don't think it's gonna be the most comfortable daily trainer on the market in that regard. I think it does a lot of things well. It is more geared towards like the top end of daily, where it's pushing closer to speed than like that true daily where it's gonna be more comfortable and impact absorbing. But still, overall, I think this is a phenomenal shoe when it comes to that midsole performance. But let's talk about the value now. So for this shoe, I paid $90. I got them on Amazon Prime. I got them in 2 days. And I think for $90, again, this kind of goes back to some of the other comments I've been making about the American running shoe brands in general, right? Is that a lot of them, if you want a decent daily trainer, then I think the penultimate version of that is going to be the Evo SL. That's what everyone is saying is like, that's the best, one of the best daily trainers of all time, right? And that has the Light Strike Pro, that race foam in it. That shoe is retailing for $150, and I'm sure, certainly you can get it on sale now for anywhere between, I think I've seen it as low as $70, $80, but let's just go with what the retail price is, because again, when we're thinking of general accessibility, like the time and effort it takes to actually find and purchase shoes, I mean, $90 compared to $150. I mean, this is about $40 cheaper. Yeah, 40, it is, sorry, not $40, 40% cheaper than the Evo SL. And what you're getting for 40% cheaper for retail is, in my opinion, a very comparable shoe when you're actually looking at it. Because again, what is the Evo SL really doing for a lot of people? It's just a faster daily trainer. So if you want faster daily miles, you can certainly get that in this shoe. And let's just break it down the way I always do value though. Let's do the ranges, right? So when we're looking at a range, it's going to be the amount of miles that it's going to be able to hold up for, and the miles that you can run in any given session, all the way up to the range in terms of pace. So this shoe, as I've mentioned before, when we're looking at the miles, is going to be for daily paces. So I've run about 6.5, 7 miles in this shoe because I did use it for workouts, and it performed consistently throughout that entire run. Very consistent throughout. I don't see any problems with it. Normally, just because I am a bigger runner, I typically start seeing creasing, and there's none in this shoe with the 30 miles I've put in it so far. So pretty comfortable to say that this is going to last at least just as long as any other daily trainer. And then when we're looking at the overall range of pace, again, because I've pushed it up to 7 miles, didn't feel like it bottomed out at all. I think it covers that portion when we're looking at the range really well. Now, when it comes to the paces, so again, I'm going to be referencing those hill repeats. And again, I'm a bigger runner. When I was doing the hill repeats, going uphill, I hit some 6-minute flat paces for, I think it was about 0.15 miles. So again, handles the up-tempo work really well. Didn't have any problem, didn't feel like I was forcing myself in any way. It was very natural feeling. Because again, it's not as aggressive of a toe-off as something like the Endorphin Speed series, but it has just enough of that rocker that I think helps with when you're picking up the pace. And so with that being said, the other portion that it needs to cover as well is it going to cover things when we're looking at the daily paces? And as I mentioned, I think it does really well. And actually, when I did my run today, it was around an 8:20 pace per mile for my 4 easy miles. And that's the faster end of my daily paces that I run. And like I said, I think that's really where this sits very well. So when we're looking at the value and the range that it covers for its intended purpose, and when we're looking at the price, again, it's another Chinese shoe that I'm gonna have to give a 9 out of 10 for the value. I mean, so one of the reasons, sorry, let me close out and then I'll give my closing thoughts here. So with that being said, 8 for the upper, 8 for the midsole, 9 for the outsole. So that's going to be a 25 out of 30. So that's going to be one of the more higher recommended offerings that I say most people should definitely try out. Again, there are some fitment issues with the upper, so that's one of the key considerations if you do have a wider foot or a foot with more volume that you need for the top of your foot. So let's get over to closing thoughts now. So one of the reasons why I was particularly interested in Chinese shoes is because of the price point, right? Like, is there actually a lot of value to these shoes? And the reason why I care about that is because, well, one, I clearly enjoy running shoes. But 2, I'm planning, and my wife and I are planning on having a kid in the next year or so. And so one of those things that's gonna have to be changing from a priority standpoint is where I spend my money. And so when we're thinking about that, right, like one of the first things we're gonna have to start looking at is cost optimizing my rotation. And so the Chinese shoes just seemed like a really natural and honestly very timely offering, because for me, if I can still get a ton of value out of my running shoes, and again, the value when it's looking at the durability, the intended purposes that it can accomplish and all of that, I think that that's where a lot of my interest and focus is. And that's why, I could certainly spend the money on getting some racers. I just don't see the real value in that to me at the end of the day, because again, running to me, the sustainability is in the daily practice. It's not in the races. The races is the icing on the cake, to me at least. So another great Chinese shoe when we're looking at the overall value, I do have the Chowdun Lely 2.0 coming in. I believe it's coming in tomorrow or Saturday, so be sure to look out for that review. And then I'm gonna look at the rest of the Lely series when those release as well. But with that being said, guys, I hope you liked this review, and shout out to one of you in the comments who asked me to do a review of this shoe, because honestly, this was just going to be my treadmill shoe. And now that one of you asked me to do a full review on it, and I've got 3 runs in it since that person asked, I'm very glad that someone encouraged me to do so, because I actually really enjoy this shoe. I should have put a little bit more respect on it than I did, and I'm definitely gonna be getting more miles on it moving forward. But with that being said, guys, I hope you guys liked the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. And if you didn't, or disagree, let me know down below. I enjoy the engagement with you, and it's completely okay to have healthy disagreement on the things that we experience and put on our feet, because I think, again, the context help us all become much more informed purchasers, and we all should be cognizant of where we're spending our money. So with that being said, guys, thanks for watching, and we'll talk soon.